Hey everyone, Seth here from Hub City Vintage, and today we're going to take a look at something I think everyone should consider when defining what makes a watch brand great. For me, one of the most important factors is what are their entry-level pieces like. And for our purposes, and especially from a vintage standpoint, I think this Sportsman is likely the fairest example of something we can use as a benchmark to grade Seiko in that area. Now let's just take it from the beginning. The Sportsman came onto the scene for Seiko in about 1960 and ran for nearly the entire decade. This in fact is a September 1967 6602, so hand wound 9981, and most all of the Sportsmans were hand wound calibers. Later you would see the Sportsmatic automatic self-winding movement and the Sportsmatic 5. The Sportsman was basically the foundation on which the 5 series that would be later to come was built. It had some of the same ideals, some of the same purposes built behind it. This is your everyday, everyman watch. You know, this was not anything fancy, no frills. You can see this is the mid case here is actually a plated case, chrome plated with a stainless steel bezel and a stainless steel snap-on case back, designated as waterproof, and that's because there's a gasket behind the case back here. And again, on this crown tube, inside of the crown, there's also a gasket. So at that time, waterproof was merely just a description of a construction style of watch, and this is sort of a good idea of what was meant by that. But we do have some wear here on the corners of the lugs. You can see a bit of the brass beneath, but not too bad. The corners are still sharp. No real missing metal other than the plating. Otherwise, it's really kind of in good shape. I think I can see a bit of the stem inside of the tube there. I doubt it's enough to salvage. We'll probably have to replace that stem, but we're prepared to do that. No worries. So at this time, when the Sportsman came out, you have to remember that Seiko had really only been building their own stuff for a little over a decade. You know, prior to the Super, and then of course Seiko's sort of breakout movement, the Marvel, they were basically having movement shipped over from a Swiss brand, Morris, and were sort of just redesigning them and repurposing them to what Seiko wanted to produce, and this is at a time when they're basically throwing everything into R&D and using these Morris Bosch's until things sort of got off the ground for them. So by the mid '60s, Seiko's still kind of in its infancy as far as brand building is concerned. And that's okay, because I think that even speaks more highly about them when we look at things like the Sportsman and their entry-level pieces. You know, this is economical for the greater watch buying public, and still the amount of attention to detail, the amount of effort that went into making this a great watch, not only in the build quality but in the aesthetics, I think that just says a lot about Seiko to me. Now, let's talk about the design first of all. This is classic mid-century. Now you can see we've got just a Seiko staple here with the silvery white sunburst style with a nice glossy lacquer finish. You've got your baguette markers here that are polished and beveled. We've got our Dauphine hands tapered to a nice fine point, long sweep with a curved tip to sort of ride along the curvature of the crystal and almost touch into that little subtle minute track that we see there. Of course, this one looks like it's seen better days. I can even see pieces of the crystal floating around in there. I don't want to move them around too much because I don't want to scratch the dial. But honestly, I think, just from having looked at so many watches, I think there's quite a bit of potential here. This could be a beautiful watch, and obviously I believe in it enough to think that this could be a great running watch. I have no doubt that it looks as good on the inside from the back as it does from the front. Certainly worth salvaging. I think this will be a great little watch. But more importantly, for you guys, I'm going to give it away when we're done. If you have not been over to our Patreon, if you're not supporting us over there, maybe consider $7 a month, and you'll get access to all of our upcoming inventory. I'll show you them just in the same way we're doing this one here. You guys will get a sort of a breakdown of everything that's coming in before we do anything to it. We'll talk about condition as it's coming in and what to expect in the next drop. And we make some other exclusive content over there, but $7 a month, and you can also be entered into a chance to win this Sportsman when we're done with it. So we'll try to make this a one-part video, maybe two. We'll see how it goes. I know nothing about this watch other than what we're looking at right now. I literally took it out of the box an hour ago, made sure I had the right crystal, stem, and crown for it. And if we need any other parts, hopefully I'll have them laying around. But we're going to do this sort of as an experiment together. We'll see what's back there. Hopefully I'm not too terribly surprised when we get it open, but I think it's going to be just fine. At any rate, for one of our lucky patrons over at Patreon, when we are done with this one, and I may even get you guys to help me pick out a nice strap for it. Got a few options over there I think that'll fit. We'll pick a strap, maybe even let the winner pick a strap, and somebody's going to get a watch. And somebody else is also going to get one of our 3-pocket watch rolls. So 2 giveaways for Patreon supporters. So maybe consider taking a look over there. If you don't like it, you can always leave, but I think we're posting up enough content that it might be worth your $7. All right, so all that aside, all the fine print aside, let's get into this one. So as I mentioned, we know that we're missing a stem and a crown, so I went ahead and went into my parts bin, and I did find the correct crown, and I've also got, looks like maybe 2 stems for Manual Wine Sportsman, so we've got that as well. These are best fits. This is vintage replacement parts here. Envelope is falling apart. I had to tape it back up when I pulled it out of my drawer yesterday. And I've also got this GS 327 W01 AN replacement crystal as well. So we've got everything we need, at least from an aesthetic standpoint, to get this one back to its best. And so I think we're just gonna, let's go ahead and start taking it apart. As I mentioned, we want to be very careful that we don't do anything that's going to cause those crystal pieces to scratch that dial. So I'm going to try to go slow about this. Let's back out a little bit here, give you a bigger view of what's going on, and let's see if I can get this case back off of here. All right, yeah, that's not too bad at all. Here, let's go back in a little closer. So you can see the gasket is still in there in the case back. I thought I felt a little rattle, but maybe that's because the crown is not in place, but I was not expecting to see that gasket in there. All right, so here's what we've got. Here's our mainspring and ratchet wheel here. This is a smaller movement, 6602. And in fact, if you checked out the last watches that we had on offer, I had a little gold salesman sample tank that was sort of the base movement of this one, a 66. And the O2 is what qualifies this one as being different from that one, as the O2 designates that it has a date function. So yes, it's a kind of a smaller movement. You've got this nice wide movement ring here to sort of keep everything in place. I think this watch is around 36 millimeters, but still, I think for, just this being entry level, Seiko did such a great job of, here, let's turn this right side up here. Did a great job of finishing these movements. They're not obviously anything ostentatious, or I wouldn't call this a beautifully finished watch, but for its purposes, they certainly could have left it without a lot of this finished work that most people are never going to see anyway. So obviously I can't remove that stem as it is. I'm gonna need to take this movement out of here. So let's do that. We'll pull these movement ring studs out, and then we'll then we'll get that stem out of there. So this is the detent, and it's basically, you can, when you press this little, we'll call it a button, this actually pushes the set lever up off of the stem. There's a small stud on the bottom of the set lever that rides along a groove in the stem, and that's what holds the stem in place and allows you to push back and forth without pulling it out of the crown tube. But obviously, if we can't get to the stem, pushing the detent here now is not going to do much for us. So we have to get the whole movement out of there and then remove the stem. Don't just go willy-nilly pushing detents and pulling stems and crowns either, because some movements, lots of them actually, you have to have the stem in a particular position. You don't want to just pull it out and expect it. You can't just pull it out and expect that it's going to go right back in. There are lots of movements where everything has to be set up a particular way for the keyless to line up as it should. And so something to consider. Maybe look that information up if you're ever taking a watch movement from a case. It's best to know exactly the correct way that the keyless should be lined up. So we've got our movement ring screws out, and let's get that movement ring out of the case. There we go. You can see that's a nice big solid movement ring. Gives the watch some weight, and certainly that's going to secure the movement from rattling around in the case too much. And now with that out of the way, we can get a better look at the movement in its entirety. So we can see here, yep, there's plenty of stem there, but I don't think it's going to be enough to salvage. It's still probably a little short. So I don't think I'm going to try to pull that. I think I'm going to go ahead and just remove that stem. Just to be safe, and then we'll pull the movement from the case. There is our broken stem, quite a bit there. I don't ever really throw anything away, so we'll save that. I'm sure that that can be used in another movement at some point. I think I'm going to go ahead and remove the balance before we do that. Let's get that cap jewel out. So we've gotten the movement out, and as I suspected, even with those pieces of broken crystal rattling around in there, it doesn't look like it did too much damage to the dial itself. The finish looks very clean. I am pretty happy with that. I think what I'm going to go ahead and do is put together the stem and crown that I pulled for replacement, and that will just give us a way to we'll probably end up needing to shorten this stem to fit at some point before it goes back in the case. Get a right measurement for that. But in the meantime, this will allow us to set the hands so that we can line them up to remove them. We've got our new stem and crown installed. I can feel that winding, and of course we can now set the hands. So let's bring them all back up to meet the second hand there. That feels nice and smooth setting. Cannon pinion feels good too. All right, let's take those hands off of there. Protect them with a piece of plastic there. Those look very nice. Not a lot of oxidation, actually, not really any. No real scratches. We'll set those aside and get them cleaned up in a bit as well. You can always wipe it with a soft bristled brush as well. Use the softest bristle that you can find and make sure you keep it clean as well. Don't use it for anything else. Very nice. Lacquer finish looks very much intact. That is a beautiful dial. And this, of course, is not going to be a quick set. Not quite there yet for this particular caliber. But you can use what's called a semi-quick set method. So let's bring the, I think I pulled the cannon pinion up. Moving the hands, that's all right. We'll just press it back down. Snaps right back in place. So let's bring the hands around, if they were there, till the date changes, and I'll show you how quick set, semi-quick set, setting the date works. Basically, you can see the date roll there, and a lot of times there'll be a bit of a jump when we retreat the hands, but here I don't think there is one on this particular one. But you want to go back to about what would be 9 o'clock and then come forward again, and you can do that basically over and over again until you get to the correct date. I'm not going far enough, I can't see it without the hands, so it's difficult to know. There we go, 26. I keep missing the mark. There we go, 27. I can actually hear the little click of the date wheel in there. There it is, 28. 29, but basically you can see that certainly beats rolling the hands around 24 hours at a time to change the date. But that is your semi-quick set method. Let's pull the dial and then we'll get a look at the calendar side of this movement. I think I mentioned it in a previous video, but oftentimes you can find the production date of the dial stamped on the back of it as well, and I think in this case it actually perfectly matches our case. The case was from September of 1967, and you can see here 7-9, which for Seiko, the year within the decade, is first, which is our 7 for 1967, and of course we've got a 9 there for September. So there you go. That's the back of the dial, and it's stamped with the production date, and on the front again. Very nice. All right, we'll set that aside. And here is a look at the calendar side components. Let's get a little closer, and we will disassemble the calendar side first, and then we'll flip it over and take a look at the train side. If you ever find yourself disassembling mechanical watches, and I think it works this way for quite a few industries, that if you see these slotted screws where there are multiple slots instead of just one for a flathead screwdriver, this typically indicates that it turns opposite the direction of a normal screw to left-hand thread. So rather than to tighten it to the right, you'll actually tighten it to the left and loosen to the right. Just worth noting if you are working with small mechanical items, that a lot of times that's the way, and you can easily break a screw head by forcing it too far in the wrong direction. With this one, we'll see. We'll loosen as we turn to the right. Reverse thread. And there we are, basically disassembled. Of course, I still need to pull the mainspring from the barrel, and there's a couple of cap jewels on the barrel bridge that I'll pull and clean separately as well. But this is the movement pretty much in its entirety disassembled. One thing you'll want to remember with a 66, and this is part of the fun of watch repair. The first time I worked on, I think it was a 2461, 2451, which is the same as a same family as a 66. 6619 is the same way as well. Between this center wheel bridge and the seconds wheel here, there's a small washer that is very small and very easy to lose track of, and you pretty much need to remember that it's there all the time. And I watched it as I pulled away the seconds wheel here to make sure that it stayed in place on that wheel. Let's see if I can, here, I'll take it off of there. Because normally it either stays kind of stuck to the seconds wheel, or sometimes it'll be left sitting there on top of that center wheel bridge. There, you can see sometimes it can be easy to lose or misplace such small and minuscule parts, but there's ours. We have it in place, no worries, and we'll make sure it gets back where it's supposed to be on the other side of cleaning. But here we are, basically done with this part. So there's our hand wind 6602, and of course we'll get the case taken apart as well, get the bezel off, and we'll get that all cleaned up. I think it's going to clean up very nicely. And then we'll get ready to start putting things back together on the other side. If this is a watch you're interested in owning, maybe you'll consider supporting us over at Patreon. But I hope that you enjoyed this portion today, and come back after we get everything cleaned up and ready to be put back together, and we'll see how it's running. All right, thanks a lot. You guys have a great week. I'll see you soon.